It's Saturday, September 26th, and got the combine pulled out. Fairly damp this morning so far, and cloudy. It's supposed to be super warm today. I'm not sure when the clouds are supposed to break up, or some of this may even be like smoke from out west, because it's kind of pink, if it'll show up in the camera. So our game plan, we've got the truck full from beans we ran yesterday, but the elevator is not going to be open until 11 o'clock. So we've got a little bit before we can go do anything with that. I need to get this blown off and checked over and do the daily lube stuff on it. And if I have time, or I'm planning on trying to get a CB radio put in the truck, because we've never done that. And the elevator that we're going to haul to this fall, that's sort of how they like to communicate whose load is being hauled in. So I'm going to try to get that rigged up. I have all the stuff, I think. I don't really have a way to do the test on the antennas to get the impedance right on that, so hopefully we can get it good enough that it'll work from 100 feet away. And if I get that done and the beans are ready to go, I've got an auger to run through and some windows to wash that I never did. Some things that were still on the to-do list that didn't get to done. Which, nothing critical, just a few things to make life a little bit easier. The windows on this are not any too clean, especially the far side vertical glass on the side of the cab there. We're closing in on 11 a.m. and it was supposed to be 20%, I think, cloud cover at this point. It looks a little more than that, I think. Beans are still pretty tough. I just walked out there a little bit ago. I've been screwing around for the last probably at least hour and a half, trying to get a CB rigged up in the semi so that we can talk to the scale house at the elevator. If you ever find orange wire nuts in a vehicle, probably safe to assume that somebody who didn't know what they were doing worked on it at some point. I don't love crimp connectors, but they're not as bad as those twisty wire nut things that come with $5 Chinese light fixtures from Walmart or big box stores. Screwed around for a little bit trying to figure out why I didn't have a switched wire in the little cubby in the headliner area there for the radios. It turns out somebody had wired the switched hot wire to ground directly. So I found the popped fuse. Should have known better than to try it the way it was. Put a new fuse in, popped it immediately. So eventually figured out what was going on. Was able to get power wired up, and then discovered that the radio that I was going to put in there is too wide for the hole in the plastic headliner piece. So probably going to get a different radio, and that means no radio today at least. So sent Dad on his way to get that load hauled in, and also discovered that so the truck has CB antennas on each mirror, and one of them has a connector and one of them doesn't, where the wires come into that radio hole area. And the one that had a connector isn't soldered. It had some electrical tape on it, and after finding the wire nut deal, was pretty suspicious of that. So need to work on it, and it wasn't a spot that was going to be very easy to get where we can get electricity to solder anything right now anyway. And there's not really a good spot to put the radio other than where it belongs, just because you're going to end up with wires running all over the place, and I don't know exactly what the DOT thinks of having a bunch of wires going through your field of vision. So that's on hold until we get a different radio, I think. So now I get to do my favorite job on the farm, which is blowing off combines during soybean harvest. Probably should go find a sweatshirt so that I don't get bean dust all over myself. But I did get my goggles and my mask that I gave a nice 175 psi laundry job to with the air hose. So maybe it's not totally plugged up with dust. So we're going to get the combine cleaned up a little bit. With it being relatively windy yesterday when I was running, probably there's not a ton of dust, but there are several spots on this machine that we know of where dirt accumulates inside pulleys and gets spun into the outside edge from the centrifugal force. So we're going to at least give it a once over, and there's a few daily lube things both on the combine and the head to grease. And then we'll see what happens with the weather. It was supposed to be 90 degrees and sunny this afternoon, but we're not there yet for sure. It's maybe, I would say it's 70, not more than 75 right now for sure. That's probably basically good enough for the time being. There's a few spots on the head that I'll blow off also, and maybe check some sickle sections, because it seemed like it was pushing quite a bit on this left side when it started getting tough. There may be some issues with the cutter bar level. There's bolts that adjust kind of, it's more for the tilt, I think, but Dad thought it was wrong and sort of started changing things, and I'm not sure if that was a good or bad thing. So mostly going to loop stuff up, I think, and wait until the beans get dry. Windows are nice and shiny clean, so we can see that sickle shatter soybeans flying in high definition now. I use this stuff and love it. Not endorsed by them or getting any money to say this, but it works really well for getting windows actually clean, and it seems like it helps keep them clean also. It's pretty cheap, available anywhere, invisible glass. So I think this is ready to go, and then I need to grease a couple zerks underneath, but it's hard to get to with the head partway down. So I'm going to lift it up, and I probably should look at the sickle over a little closer. There was maybe a section over here that I thought I might replace, but I didn't decide that for sure. We're closing in on noon. Starting to see glimpses of the sun every now and then, but not very often. So hopefully I can run something today, but I don't think it's going to be real early. After lunch, out here checking to see if beans are ready to do anything yet. So basically what we're doing, see if the pods crunch, and that one definitely don't. If they're dry, basically they'll snap right open, and you want that so that you can get the beans threshed out of the pods in the combine. We'll give them a chew test. No, it's pretty wet. I would say they're 14, 15 probably, at least those. Usually the top pods will be crispy, so there's like, that one was pretty good. And then the lower pods will be the last ones ready, so when we're kind of deciding whether or not we can run, we're really looking at those lower beans. Even the pods are, even though the pods are crispy on those, the beans themselves are still a little bit wet, I would say. When they get down to 13, usually you can have them snap a little bit when you crunch them between your teeth. So I think we're getting closer, but a little bit longer before we can do anything. Well, it's about 2:45, and I came back out to try these again, and they're still a little bit wet, I think. But the bigger problem is my reel just stopped turning, and I think something messed up on my track for the Orbit Reel, because I've got at least one roller clear out of the track and one that's bent sideways. These, if you can see the forward tube there where the tines are sticking up, and they should be sticking down. So I think we're going to drive this up to the shop and figure out what's going on with that, and if we can get it fixed. I think I have one that's kind of screwed up, but that we can probably change out and get rolling, because I have a feeling the little arm is pretty bent on that one. Alright, so this should be here. I think this one should be down instead of up. At least, well, I don't know. There's something going on for sure. So we've got at least 3 that are messed up, I think. Not exactly forward messed up. Got a little to do. It's about 6:30, and the reel is back together. I'm not real confident in the repair, to be honest. Not a fan of the Orbit Reel today. Not sure. So we got everything straightened out on the little crank arm deals on the end of the pipes. But it seems like, so it cracked the track. So at some point they started using all metal tracks for the ends on these, but this one has metal on the bottom half and plastic on the top half. And the plastic has gotten beat up and is cracked around the bolt. So if you can see the 4 little silver dots there, those are the bolts where we put in a metal piece on the backside to try to kind of reinforce that. But there's still a pretty good divot on the bottom side, and I have a feeling that that may have been a factor in the thing flying off the track, getting the rollers off the track, and then bending things. So, not sure what our game plan is. I'm half tempted to switch the thing back to the regular John Deere reel. Dad put this on because since it doesn't rotate, I mean, since the tines rotate all the way over, it doesn't wrap if you get into weeds or even beans to some extent. But it seems like 90% of my downtime in beans the last 3 years probably has been a result of that Orbit Reel track, roller, crank arm stuff. And you can buy replacement tracks that are all metal, but they're quite expensive, I believe. And at this point, nothing's going to ship until Monday, which means it's going to be Tuesday or more likely Wednesday, Thursday before it gets here. Not sure what our game plan is. It takes probably half a day to switch things over, so it's not any small task because you got to take the reel clear off, or take brackets off both ends at least. So I don't know. It's supposed to rain tomorrow, and we might have green brackets on the end of the reel on Monday. Well, we sure didn't light the world on fire today, but we at least got one hopper load. I doubt if I'm going to get this field finished, but I don't have a whole lot left, so maybe. We'll have to see. I don't think any of these early beans are yielding great. They are a little bit better than the monitor says, though. At least we were about 11% off on the number of bushels that was on the truck versus what we thought was on the truck. So I guess that at least is good, that there's more bushels than we think, or that the monitor thinks there are. Just have to see what the weather does tomorrow. I think the rain has sort of fluctuated about 40 or 50% chance, or tenth to a quarter of an inch, so not supposed to be very much quantity, but I have a feeling we're going to get a shower and it's going to be cloudy, and probably we're not going to get much done, if anything. See what tomorrow brings. I am going to keep running as long as I can, but it's about to get dark enough that there's not going to be very much to see on the camera, I have a feeling. So this might be it for videos for the time being. I will report back when something interesting happens. Well, I think we made it about 5 acres before one of our reel pieces screwed up again. You'll notice, once I get through the gully and all the short stuff here, there's one that's carrying a bunch of junk around. That's because the reel tines are not in the orientation they're supposed to be. So it hasn't thrown the roller clear out of the track yet, but this whole thing, basically the roller has to lead the movement going part of the direction, and that's the way that it keeps it in the right place is essentially by a couple of brackets that bump on the front and back of the actual plastic reel tines. And they just have a little, about a 1/4 inch by maybe 1/8 inch tall nub that locks into the pipe on the reel. And basically what happens is if that tries to go the opposite direction and binds, it shears off those little plastic nubs and then can sort of turn whatever friggin' direction it wants. So that's basically what's going on right now. It doesn't seem like things are getting too wet yet, even though we're pushing 8 o'clock. So I decided I was going to keep going for a while at least. At this point, I'm not sure if I even care if I tear anything up, as long as I don't tear up anything that's, you know, the reel as a whole rather than the Orbit Reel, because I kind of think I'm going to take this whole thing off tomorrow. I don't know. I'm going to do some research, but I think replacing those plastic tracks with steel is probably going to be a high 3-digit project, if not $1,000 plus, just for the pieces. And I don't know if I like the thing that much, especially when it seems like I'm going to have to fight it the next few days. And if I can at least get something that works, then I can make the decision later to fix it right and put it back together, or sell it as scrap or whatever. Anyway, I don't know how the video quality is going to be on this, because this camera doesn't really do very well in low light, it seems. It hasn't frozen so far, so I guess that's a positive from how it usually acts in low light situations, but that's pretty much the commentary so far, I guess. Not a fan of orbit reels today. It's about 10 o'clock and combine's back in the shop. I did end up getting this field, or this variety in this field, I should say, this patch finished up. Orbit reel continues to haunt my dreams. So the first 5 acres was fine, and then it flipped one of the, actually it was this one, flipped one of the bats, I guess you would say. Ended up fixing it after the first full load, I believe. So I swapped a couple, it sheared off the nubs on both of those outside tines, so I swapped those with a couple others on the reel that don't really need the nubs as bad. And that one worked fine the rest of the night, but I had another one that caused problems, and you can actually, well, I can at least see that one up there where the 2 tines are sticking up in the air and the others are down. The arm on that one looks to be bent. I had a time when I was going across the field and all of a sudden the reel just abruptly stopped. And it ended up, like, I found one that was bent and I beat it in with a hammer back halfway straight. I think it just like wedged hard enough that it hit a relief valve somewhere in the hydraulic system. So that worked okay for a little bit, and then it flipped over. And I think I tried to fix it once, but I didn't swap any more tines because at that point I was getting pretty frustrated with the whole process. But I was able to get finished out here. So once again, not lighting the world on fire. I think this field did yield a little better than I thought it was yesterday, so happy about that. It's not anything special, but at least decent, I guess we'll say. I'm going to go do some research. I got some part numbers off those plastic tracks. I'm going to go see exactly how much those cost. I think I looked it up once last year, and it was a lot more than I thought it should have been, but I don't remember exactly what that number was now. So maybe my perception of what it's worth for something that functions properly has changed. I still think there's a pretty fair chance that we might be pulling a reel off a combine tomorrow morning, but I'll take a look at the installation directions and figure out exactly what all's involved in that before I make the final call. And it might depend a little bit what the weather does too. There's a possibility that if it's going to be rainy and we're not going to be able to run beans anyway, I'll just order parts and we'll run corn in the beginning of the week and then go back to beans after the parts get here, I guess. But we also could swap the reel off, or swap the orbit reel kit off back to factory John Deere style. So, fun times.